Me?
Let's set the scene. The year is 1969. The Great Barrier Reef glistens like a watercolor dream, and on the remote island of Dunk Isle, a little-known 24-year-old actress named Helen Mirren is about to become unforgettable, not just for her screen presence, but for a nude scene that even today sparks controversy. But here's the twist. While audiences marveled, Helen Mirren herself was resentful. And not just because she had to disrobe. Oh no, it went much deeper. Curious? Good, we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about how this sultry, sea-swept Australian drama Age of Consent turned out to be a career launching moment for some, and a swan song for others. Age of Consent was the final theatrical film directed by the legendary Michael Powell, one half of the powerhouse duo Powell and Pressburger, the minds behind cinematic milestones like The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus. After the scandal of his controversial thriller Peeping Tom tanked his career in Britain, Powell found himself essentially exiled from mainstream film. So he turned to Australia for a creative second wind. The result was a visually rich, morally murky, and curiously charming film based on Norman Lindsay's semi-autobiographical 1938 novel of the same name. James Mason stars as Bradley Morahan, a burned-out New York-based Australian artist who flees the concrete jungle in search of solitude and inspiration on the isolated coast of Queensland. On this lush and largely uninhabited island, he crosses paths with Cora Ryan, played by Helen Mirren in her first major film role. She's a wild, strong-willed island girl, raised by her gin-soaked grandmother and determined to escape her squalid life for a shot at becoming a hairdresser in Brisbane. Bradley pays Cora to model for him, at first clothed, then eventually nude, as she becomes his muse, reigniting his creative spark. Their relationship stays just this side of inappropriate, at least by the film standards. But here's where things start to heat up, on screen and behind the scenes. Let's address the elephant in the editing room: Mirren's nude scenes. While the film is surprisingly restrained by today's standards, Mirren spends much of her screen time in the sea or sun, unclothed and unapologetically free. But Helen Mirren, by her own admission, didn't feel empowered. She felt exploited, and not just because she was nude in front of the camera. According to art historian Jeanette Horn, Mirren expressed discomfort during filming, resenting that she was the only one naked while the entire crew remained fully clothed. She felt exposed in more ways than one. The imbalance wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. And that feeling of being objectified seeped into her character too. Cora agrees to pose nude not because she wants to, but because it's her only ticket off the island, a transaction that blurs the line between agency and coercion. Interestingly, those same nude scenes that made Mirren uneasy were also censored outside Australia. Columbia Pictures, worried about pushing boundaries, cut approximately 8 minutes from the UK and US versions, including the film's opening bedroom scene with Mason and future wife Clarissa Kay, as well as parts of Cora's modeling sequences. They even ditched Peter Sculthorpe's moody, unconventional score and replaced it with a more commercially acceptable one by Stanley Myers. Powell was not pleased. Thankfully, Powell's original vision was later resurrected. In 2005, thanks to restoration efforts spearheaded by none other than Martin Scorsese, an avid Powell fan, a full version with Sculthorpe's score, and the censored scenes restored debuted at the Sydney Film Festival. The restored cut has since been released on DVD and even aired on Film 4 in the UK. And yes, it's the version that finally allows audiences to see Age of Consent as Powell intended, unfiltered, uncut, and uncomfortably real. As for Helen Mirren, this was the beginning of a long and illustrious screen career. But even as she wowed critics and audiences, she bristled at being typecast as a sex symbol. In her now infamous 1975 interview with British talk show host Michael Parkinson, Mirren faced a barrage of crude remarks about her equipment. When Parkinson asked whether her body distracted from her acting, she coolly fired back, calling his line of questioning boring. Years later, rewatching the interview, she admitted, "I actually thought, bloody hell, I did really well. He was such a fucking sexist old fart." The world may have fixated on her beauty, but Mirren always insisted her power came from her talent, and the Royal Shakespeare Company seemed to agree. Unusually, the film's credits specifically mentioned that Mirren was a member of the RSC, a distinction almost never seen in film billing. That classical training shines through in Age of Consent, where despite being cast as a naive island girl, Mirren imbues Cora with layers: vulnerability, ambition, pride. There's a quiet heartbreak in how she navigates her objectification and strength in how she reclaims her story. Mirren herself would later reflect on how that role symbolized an era, one foot still in the repressive past, and the other stepping into the chaos of the sexual revolution. Of course, the film itself isn't perfect. Critics at the time, and many since, have pointed out its tonal inconsistencies. The comedy is often too broad, especially with Jack McGowan's buffoonish Nat Kelly and Neva Carr-Glynn's over-the-top gin-guzzling grandmother. The editing is choppy in places, and James Mason's attempt at an Australian accent, well, let's just say even Helen Mirren wasn't buying it. But what Age of Consent captures beautifully is the loneliness of aging, the raw hunger for creative rebirth, and the bittersweet tension between muse and artist. There's a wonderful visual metaphor running through the film. Bradley's island shack, which begins as a dilapidated ruin, is gradually transformed by his artistic touch into something vibrant and alive. It's as much a symbol for Cora's personal growth as it is for his own redemption. And then there's the dog. Yes, we have to talk about Godfrey, Bradley's loyal mutt, named after a snooty New York art dealer. The dog steals more than a few scenes and might actually be the most likable character in the film. No wonder one critic joked that Helen Mirren's only real scene-stealing rival was the dog. While the title Age of Consent naturally raises eyebrows, the film itself walks a complicated line. Unlike Norman Lindsay's original novel, where the painter and model become lovers, Powell's adaptation stops just short of crossing that boundary. The final scene, where Bradley follows a fleeing Cora into the ocean, hints at a shift in his perspective. Whether that signals love, desire, or simply deeper emotional connection is left tantalizingly vague. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think of Helen Mirren's reflections on her nude scenes in Age of Consent? Do you think she was right to feel resentful? Or do you see the role as empowering in its own way? Drop your thoughts in the comments.